arrested with my sister for shoplifting, and sitting, in that juvenile jail cell was just kind of this, like, I could see a life path. And what synchronously happened is my mom, who was a non-religious, person, said, "You're going to start going to church with your dad again. Maybe that'll fix you." And so when I started going to church in the midst of just kind of life challenges or confusion, and God got a hold of my heart. I am Nils Smith, and I am the founder and CEO of Amplify Social Media, helping Christian ministries maximize social media, and the head of innovation for a company called Dunham & Company, where we help with fundraising and marketing for Christian ministries. And I'm grateful to be a part of this, and that's my Faithly story.
Welcome to Faithly Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring tales from conversations with church leaders as they navigate the peaks and valleys of their faith journeys through their ministry work and everyday life. Join us as we delve into their challenges, moments of encouragement, and answered prayers. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. Learn more at faithly.co. Get ready to be uplifted and inspired as we unveil the heart of faith through stories from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly Stories podcast.
I usually ask people like their faith journey, but with you, I want to ask you first the origins of your name.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't remember at all. Is Nils short for something or?
Nope. Nils was actually my great-great-grandfather that brought my family over from Sweden. In Sweden, Nils is a very common name. I actually just met my first other Nils, who started an app called BibleMate, and he's based in Boston. But yeah, so Nils Berggren brought, my great-grandmother over from Sweden to the Boston area, to Worcester, Massachusetts, and that's who I'm named after. But I've never, up until recently, still never face-to-face met another Nils.
That makes sense. You got a little bit of Viking look.
I got blue eyes.
I had no idea. You were Swedish. Yeah. Okay. Or Swedish background.
And
cool.
When I had hair, it was blonde, like dirty blondish. And so I, as a teenager, I looked more Swedish.
If you post that on your Faithly profile, we'll use it as the
nice.
thumbnail.
Okay. I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
Can we get into your faith journey? Like, how did you come to Christ?
Yeah. So I grew up in really two different homes. My parents, split up when I was young, and my mother, was, agnostic or, atheist, maybe, kind of identified as non-religious. And my dad went to church consistently, but I wouldn't say faith was a priority for our family. It was more just something out of tradition that we did. And I rebelled against it probably in middle school, but where I, came to Christ is, two significant things happened in my life. There's one, when I was 15, my dad had a very transformational experience on what was called a walk to Emmaus within the Methodist Church. I saw his life, his faith becoming more important to him, where it was more than just going to church on Sundays, but something that became important to him. And then simultaneously, when I was 16, I actually got arrested with my sister for shoplifting, and sitting, in that juvenile jail cell was just kind of this, like, I could see a life path. And what synchronously happened is my mom, who was a non-religious, person, said, "You're going to start going to church with your dad again. Maybe that'll fix you." And so when I started going to church in the midst of just kind of life challenges or confusion, and God got a hold of my heart. And so I started, gave my life to Christ at probably when I was early 17, right before my senior year of high school, and started walking with Jesus, figuring out what some of that looked like, and very challenging in high school when everybody knows you, as a partier, as a whatever opinions people had of me. And then really it was early days of college where I started, found a group of men in the fraternity Brothers Under Christ, which is where I really began to be discipled and growing in my faith.
Oh, what did you get caught stealing?
That's a little embarrassing. So we got caught at, I think is what it was called, which was like a female shopping, or female clothes place. So my sister was actually stealing clothes, and I just happened to be with her. Now we, transparently, that was just when we got caught. We used to shoplift all kinds of things. Like, what it was is it was actually I used to sell, I'm an entrepreneur from a young age. I used to sell like baseball cards in middle school and then candy in elementary school. And then I actually found the margins to be really good when you began just to steal items and then sell them because you had no upfront cost. Now there were other costs that later became associated with it, but our top product was a Guess wallet. So I used to steal Guess wallets, or my sister would, was actually the better shoplifter. And then I would sell them to people at school. And but we found things that we thought people would buy from us at school. And my trunk became a storefront of shoplifted items until we got caught. And so we, for probably about 4 months, had a little business we ran out of the trunk of my 1985 Chevy Blazer. And it was really bad choices as a teenager, but that was my entrepreneurial journey of shoplifted goods.
So you literally got saved in a jail cell, like
well, I would say God got my attention in a jail cell. I got saved at a youth retreat. That I remember. The longer story maybe is that I went up there chasing. One of the things I actually found that I liked about youth group is there was lots of girls there, and so the girl I had a crush on there. I kissed another girl on the bus on the way to this retreat, and she found out, which ruined my chances for her at this retreat. So it kind of forced me to pay more attention at the retreat. And I just remember I had a moment with God of like, God, if you're real, I need to know. And I really don't want to waste my time with this religion stuff. The morality thing, like I do either way, I need to get my, morals together of I'm seeing the consequences of my bad choices, but the Jesus thing I'm struggling with. And in that moment, I felt like maybe I'll see an angel or something and God will reveal himself in that way. And I didn't. And so I called my mom, and she, in the midst of that, was going through a really difficult time battling depression. And she was in tears just saying, Nils, I just got this new job, or I don't remember what the situation was, but she said on the phone, God is good. And I remember thinking my atheist mom just said, God is good. And it was just this like Holy Spirit moment of like, oh, that's Jesus telling me he's real. And that was my like moment of I went back in that chapel and gave my life to Christ. And then it was like, oh, now what do I do now? Because I was still like, while I was like turning around my morals, I was still drinking and dipping. And, I was, trying to, I don't know what I was doing. I was a teenage boy. But I was searching, and God revealed himself to me. So I hit a low in that jail cell. But, I think the journey really began on that retreat. That was probably 6 months after the jail cell. And then it was like, okay, now I gotta live this, and now I gotta figure this out. And but I did it with the Holy Spirit. And so, that was the difference, where it's like, at first I started going to church to get moral, and then that turned into a place to chase girls, but it really found a place to find Jesus, and so that's where the faith began.
You're proof that the nicest people have the darkest past. I would not imagine you like that, because like we would be really good friends.
Yeah,
to get into so much, but I never got caught, so that was always.
You.
No, it's not, because that's the thing. It delayed
Yeah.
that fear of the Lord,
Yeah.
But luckily, I hung out like with church people more as I got older, so it just like that kind of life and those friends kind of naturally faded away.
Yeah, I more flipped a switch in my journey. Now I flipped a switch, and I remember going home from that retreat and like, oh, I've got to I can't speed anymore. And then it was like, I don't know, can I speed, can I not? Or and then it was too, some of the things like dipping, like I really enjoyed dipping tobacco, and that was really hard to stand. This Jesus thing is cool, but the moral thing, I actually kind of like these sins, but I remember I stopped speeding, and I was like, oh, I don't have to look out for cops all the time. Maybe not speeding isn't that bad. And I remember like when I stopped dipping, I was like, after probably like 2 weeks, I was like, that's actually kind of gross. And so there are certain things where it's like God just took the desire for some of those sins away. Now, obviously, there were other desires. One of the things that I remember, I had a youth pastor that said, I think you should not date for a year. And I was like, I'm 17 years old. Like, God, I can't not date. But I did. I made a commitment. Now, I wouldn't maybe be perfect in that, but I remember though, I put my focus on Jesus, in those beginning days. But man, I would say I was I was always a good person, but I remember too, like I had like a big Nike earring that I wore. And I was like, do I have to stop? Do I take out the earring now? Like, is that a part of me or is that bad? There were a lot of things that it's like, so I kept the earring for a couple of years. Not that I switched from a Nike to like a stud because that was more Jesus-like. If I could have done a cross maybe, but I think there were just things where it's like, okay, let me figure out how I connect the dots of Jesus growing in my heart, but then also being lived out through my life. And I think it what I obviously I think learned there at college, it was less about what I didn't do and more about what I was beginning to do. But it was, so much of what was getting my attention though was like most of my behavior, most of the words coming out of my mouth were just not good. And so you can be a nice person, I think, and make really bad choices. And but that was, it's crazy too, because it also seems like it was a couple years ago. I'm 43 now, and that was when I was 16, 17 years old. But man, I still remember, and I still remember the adrenaline from shoplifting and some of those things that, it's sin can be very appealing, and transitioning especially when you have a reputation and, for sin and relationships built around sin, it's hard, to make that transition. And that's where college became a natural, fresh start for me. Yeah, it was a crazy journey.
Where'd you go to school, undergrad?
So I went to Southwest Texas State University, which is now Texas State University. It was because of my, life decisions. I didn't have a whole lot of college options. It was actually, it was a one-page application and it was $20. And I remember I went on my college visit and I didn't actually make it to campus because there's a river that runs through campus and it's known as a party school. And there were, a bunch of girls laying out on the thing and a bunch of people just partying and hanging out. And I just hung out with them for the day on my college day. And a buddy of mine from high school went up there for the college day and we're like, yeah, we're going to college here. So, and I was saved at that point, but I was still in my, in my journey and God took me to a party school and I got discipled there. And I feel like it was all the temptations where my sin was, but at the end of the day, I found a new community of people. And then I also was able to be very relatable to them. The minute I feel like I've never had a more fruitful ministry than I did relationally while I was in college, just by, I think it was people that were wired like the old me, but I also understood them deeply and also understood the shame and guilt that often, even when you don't have Jesus, that comes with a lot of those choices.
So who are these people that you connected with and helped you, discipled you?
Yeah, so it was the Beta Upsilon Chi was the actual name of the fraternity, but Brothers Under Christ is kind of what they're known for. And it was a pretty new Christian fraternity that only existed in Texas. Now they're nationwide, but there was probably 20 guys. But I remember, a mutual friend or somebody connected me to them, and they're like, you should at least check them out when you get up there. So it was the first thing I did when I got there is like, how do I find out about this Christian fraternity? And this is pre-internet, no website or anything. And I think I found them. They had a booth in like the big courtyard, of the main college, center college area. And they had a booth set up and they were doing Rush, with all the other fraternities. And I went to their first Rush event. And I remember thinking, these guys look like me. They talk like, these are like my old baseball buddies. And I just, my perception of Christians and, there were cute girls at the youth group, but the guys were all dorky. And, I felt like it, I struggled to relate to a lot of the guys that I had been around that were Christians. And I felt like these are guys I want to just hang out with and do things with. And so, I socially, connected well with them. And then spiritually they had what I needed, without knowing that. And so I knew I needed some Christian friends, and I knew I probably needed to find a church up there, somehow. But so that was like first week I was there, I found them and it was such a godsend, that connection. And I remember just some of those, they, and I wish I could remember exactly kind of what some of the things were, but they often joked of like, just how, I just didn't know the Christian language and, so much of that, just how to function in Christian community yet at that point. And so, it was just the way these guys, and I remember I had a big brother, his name was Chris Peacock. He was on the baseball team there, at Southwest Texas. And so we just hit it off because of baseball initially, but every Wednesday we'd go to dinner, and he just, poured into me my freshman year of college, but so many other men. And I remember a guy named David Arnold and Travis Young and Brian Stone, and these just guys that were a couple years older than me, but guys I wanted to be like. And so to be able to be around them and have them investing in me and pouring into me as a young new believer, and just as a young man, I was 19 years old, and or 18 years old probably at that time. And that's where the discipleship process really began in my life.
Are you still in touch with them now?
Yeah, a lot of them. A couple of them stood next to me at my wedding. I mentioned Travis Young is planning a church right now in the Fort Worth area. We've stayed in touch through the years, and that's the beauty of social media in a lot of ways. I would say all of them. I probably have some, at least once a year, some kind of interaction with them. I would say, it's interesting you asked that, but a lot of them are still my good friends. And one guy actually from that fraternity, he came a year after me. But every Wednesday we do a Zoom call. He lives in Austin, Texas, and we do a Zoom call, and the only objective of that call is just catch up. It's a social hangout. It's not really accountability. It's not really we just do life every Wednesday on a Zoom call. We typically both get lunch and do the Zoom call together, and he's a great friend. Yeah, so a lot of those relationships continued. 20 plus years later, Bucks is what we called the fraternity. They actually became a client of mine too. Years later, probably about five or 6 years ago, I got to consult with them for about a year around their social media marketing and and fundraising strategies. And so it's kind of been full circle, even with the organization of Bucks, and love how they're raising up men in colleges around the country.
So what happened after college? What was your first job?
Yeah, I would say it actually happened not after college, but after my freshman year of college. I got an invitation to be a summer youth pastor for a church, St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Baytown, Texas. And, I was a new believer realistically, but I was cool, and I had long hair, and I, had an earring, and they're like, you'll attract youth to our church. And it was $1,000 a month for 3 months. And I was their summer youth minister. I remember that first, and this is actually how I got into digital ministry as well. That first Wednesday night youth group, there was a 7th grade girl and a high school boy. And I remember I'd planned this youth group where I was like, I bought a worship CD and a boom box. And I was like, that's how we're going to do worship, because I don't have a worship leader. And then I'll do a talk. And I was thinking there's going to be probably 20 or 30 kids show up. Well, there was 2, 7th grade girl and a high school boy, which is just awkward. And I played the first worship song that I had planned in the worship set. And then I was like, okay, this isn't working. Let's stop this. And I remember I did my devotional, and then the 7th grade girl asked me a question that changed my life. And she said, what's your aim? And I said, my aim is to reach every teenager in Baytown, Texas with the gospel of Jesus. And I was so deeply passionate. In my mind, I was like, this summer for 3 months, I'm going to do nothing but change Baytown, Texas. And it was, small oil town outside of Houston. And I'm going to just go tell everyone about Jesus. And she said, no, what's your aim? And I said, well, I just told you my aim. She said, no, what's your AOL Instant Messenger? That's where all my friends are. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, that CD you put in your computer, you get in the World Wide Web, and it's a chat thing. And that's where all my friends are. So this is my aim. And the high school boy's like, yeah, me too. Here's my aim. I got on AIM. So right after that youth group, I got on AIM. I added them, started chatting with them. We had one computer in the church, the secretary. That's when you still had secretaries, at the secretary's desk. And I got on AIM. I literally stayed at that computer till 2 a.m. chatting with teenagers, which no youth pastor should ever do. But there was no rules to how the internet worked and how online ministry worked back then. And built relationships with them, immediately. And they started connecting me to their friends right there. The next day, we had a 15-passenger van, which is also now illegal, and no 19-year-old should be driving teenage kids around in a 15-passenger van. I just went and picked them up the next day and took a bowling with their friends that I'd met in the chat group. We had we ran out of seats and seatbelts on the bus going bowling. And so those digital relationships turned into physical relationships. And so that summer, I just chatted with every teenager that they would connect me to, shared gospel. I had more than a dozen kids accept Christ in a chat room on AIM that summer, and we had more than 30 kids accept Christ in our gatherings on the Wednesday night youth group. So we did a big lock-in at the end of the year that we ended up with like over 50 kids at this thing from 2 kids. And it was just, there's digital relationships became in-person relationships. And that was my summer in youth ministry. And it was like, this is what I'm made to do. And this is what I want to do forever in my mind back then. But then I was like, you go back to college and you know, kind of get the flow. And I ended up doing that every summer at different churches during college. And then I remember when I graduated and I got a business degree, I got a business management degree, and I remember having a conversation with my dad, and the economy was down. And he said, why don't you just do that youth thing like full time for a couple of years, let the economy pick back up, and then you can get a grown up job. And you know what? I'm 43 years old now, and I've never gotten a grown up job. And so I did youth ministry then for about a decade. But social media was at the core of that. And then that's what led to, you know, a church in San Antonio said, you seem to know how we've been thinking about launching an online church. And this is 13 years ago. And I said, well, I think if you use this new Facebook.com website, I think, you know, AOL had come along, MySpace had come along, but Facebook was this new thing that was just now going from being just for college students to now being for everyone. I said, I think this thing is going to really catch on. So we bought onlinechurch.com, and we started doing digital ministry and took our local church global. And within weeks, we were seeing, you know, thousands of people all over the world logging into our online services and figured out how to do online church. And so that was kind of my journey into full-time ministry that went from like summer youth minister with a 19-year-old that the bad theology I taught, you know, must have taught and said, but kids, despite, you know, my not knowing what I was doing or having a strategy for online, kids got saved, and God was gracious in it. And it's been a fun journey along the way.
What were some of the social media strategies you were using throughout your ministries, your youth ministries?
Yeah, you know, I would say there's, you know, at the core, I just built relationships. You know, I just showed up to where they were and just tried to connect with as many teenagers as I could. You know, I would say there were a couple of just transformational moments, though, where I began just to see breakthroughs. One, you know, especially probably when Facebook had come out, and this is when it was still just for college students. They had opened up where you could run ads on it. And I was running a college ministry for, you know, like we did youth and college. And our college ministry was maybe 20 college students in a Bible study. And I started running Facebook ads, spending, I think, $10 a week on Facebook ads. Within like a month of doing that, we had tripled our group. We had over 100 people in the room because Facebook ads are super cheap. You could target them to just college students in San Antonio to come be a part of this Bible study. I was like, what do we do with this? And so we ended up growing that college ministry to over 200 college students all through Facebook ads. And I don't think I ever spent more than $200 altogether for those ads. And just the fruitfulness we saw there. So that got me really into digital advertising and what's possible there from a ministry. I had no background in doing that. I just saw I saw an ad, and then it said, create your own ad. I was like, let me try that. And so that was awesome. And then when we launched online church, after I had that experience with Facebook, I ran Facebook ads to bring people into online church on a budget of $100 a month. And when I then opened up that targeting from just college students in San Antonio to anybody anywhere in the world, those ads became way cheaper, and we were able to reach people all over the world and bring them into our online church. And so just, you know, I think that connection of digital advertising and the power of Facebook. The other thing I'd say we did with Facebook in particular is we had a Facebook page that we used to build community, you know, 24/7 in between our church services. Well, where most people used social media, and most churches in particular, was for marketing. They would just say, come to our church, you know, come to our church, come to our church. And what we did is I just used basically quotes from the sermon. I used Bible verses from the message. And what I found is that when I actually did minister, we'd always ask for, every day we do a prayer. How can we pray for you? And we would just do a big prayer thread on the Facebook page. And so what would happen is these posts were just going viral. And so when we said we're going to use this mostly for ministry and then secondarily for marketing, we saw our organic reach explode. So that page, within a year, I think we're over 300, followers, all organic on our Facebook page, ended up growing it to about 1 million. And it was just because we chose to do ministry there rather than just make it a marketing platform. And so we still did marketing, but primarily through advertising. and then used our page for ministry.
Do you feel like that's an effective strategy now, or just because those early days it worked really well? Because 2002, it's like almost 20 years, you've been
so that strategy I think really took effect about 13 years ago. And I actually created a formula back then that I still use today with my clients. And the formula was, we're going to post a minimum of 50% inspirational content, a maximum of 20% informational content. And then the other 30% are, I call them 3 C's of conversation, celebration, and connection. So conversation being, we're just going to ask a question like, can we pray for you? Or it was funny, my pastor used to get upset because I would ask like, where's the best hamburger? And everybody had an opinion. A bunch of people comment, and then he'd be like, ask them what their favorite point was from the Sunday sermon. And we get like 10 comments, and it was just too deep. I think we realized that the more shallow we kept the conversation, sometimes it would it was more easy. It was just more natural and easy to respond to. So we said conversation, celebration, connection. So celebrating what God's doing in the life of our church or ministry. So we'd celebrate, salvations, we'd celebrate baptisms, we'd celebrate life change stories. Sometimes or just celebrate Easter or Christmas or, things like that. And then connection would be a behind the scenes. And so, hey, we're filming for Sunday, or, celebrating our pastor's birthday, or we're going to highlight a volunteer. And it created a personal connection to the ministry. And so we've used that formula, and still today, we use it. One of the things that happened to me and where my agency was birthed is about a year into launching onlinechurch.com, a guy named Nick Vujicic was a guest speaker at our church. And he's like, hey, I've got 20,000 people on my Facebook page. Can you help run that for me on the side? And you seem to know how this Facebook thing works really well. And he said, and I think I said, you because you're so engaging with video and he has no arms and legs, many people have probably seen him online. I said, I think you should be on YouTube too. I think people should see you and will engage better there. And so we dove in and really built up his Facebook, and still continue to run his social media. But we use that same formula today with his ministry and all of the ministries that we work with. And it's, we tweak it a little bit based on some trends, but more than a decade later, that same formula continues to work. But I think it's really the mindset for ministry leaders, focus on ministry, use these for ministry first, and secondarily let them be a marketing platform. And I think it's just like your Sunday services. You need announcements at church. People need to know what next steps they need to take within your church, but they're there for the worship and the message. And so if they're not first being inspired, they're not going to effectively take action. But I think the mistake that people make is they often try to be inspirational and then tag on a marketing, within one post, and you just got to mix it up within your content flow with a diversity of content.
Could you give some examples? Because it sounds very broad, and I'm pretty sure a lot of churches are like, wait, we are doing that. It's like, no, you're posting announcements, or you're like, it's like a classified ad instead of like inviting people into seeing what your church members are seeing. So
for sure. I think practically it's also, when something is inspirational, people are more likely to share it. And so I often describe that as even like micro content that leads into your, core actions that you want people to take. And so historically for us, back 10 years ago, that was taking a quote from the sermon, because it was all text-based, or a Bible verse. And then we started using graphics, and that started to be implemented into these platforms, and that began to see more virality. Well, now that's clips. That's a 30-second clip. That's a reel on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. And so it looks different. I think the format might be different, but every church is creating content every week with their sermon. And I think what's happening is they're just these digital platforms for it to have maximum impact. And so I think where I see even the mistake is people are often just like, hey, here's our new sermon series. Come see it on Sunday. Well, the reality is you can actually have clips from that sermon. And so they're already creating a connection to that sermon series through those clips that they're seeing. And that's going to naturally lead them to the action that you want them to take. But I think even where it's a mistake is I've seen churches that will be like, here's a clip about the woman at the well. And then they'll also even add into the post of like, oh, by the way, if you're a woman and you want to come to our women's retreat, it's going to be on this date. And that takes away, that distracts from the message of the post. And so when you want to post that women's retreat promo, just post it. it's not going to do as well. But if you have that balance of other content, but if you tag it on to your inspirational content, that's going to diminish the focus of that content piece in and of itself. So I think we just have to mix in different kinds of posts within our content strategy. And so it does take, it takes, I think some rhythms, consistency of developing out how to create those clips and, tools to use to do that. But we find that the investment is well worth it based on, where the front door that creates for your church is. Before we do anything today, we typically check it out online, and so, and often even, it's hard for me to even think of a restaurant that my wife and I have gone to on a date night that we haven't first found on Instagram and somebody shared check out this place. And so it's how we find so many new things. And honestly, it's how people are finding churches today as well. And so I think packaging our church experience well and making these platforms ministry first, that's your first touch with people. It's not when they walk in your door. They're likely checking you out on social media first, then going to your website and then finding your Sunday services and then showing up at your church. But there's that process before somebody's going to commit their time to showing up. And so social media is what I found to be the best front door for churches today.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think even before I did like Faithly stuff, I didn't really get into all the social media stuff because I think I just had a very traditional mindset of just organically, relationally, but just the ramp up of technology and the speed in which information travels, I realized, oh no, social media actually is a tool. And if anything, Christians should be pumping out more content because there's just a lot of not great content. So might as well be inspirational.
Yes.
And switch that nobody likes. It's like,
yeah.
Let just this thing be the thing, right? And let the other thing be the thing. And don't try to manipulate like an inspirational quote and then be like, oh, $9.99, just buy this thing.
Yes.
I think there's like a commercial in Vietnam, one of the Asian countries, about the dad and he's like struggling and helping the daughter. And then it's like an ad for like something, just like feels super manipulated.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm realizing more and more the importance of just engagement. Because if people are engaged, and that means they're interested and they're invested, and those are the kind of people you want to bring into your church because they're like, oh, like I want to be here rather than I was like forced to be here. So in your opinion, with the current landscape of how social media is, like where do you feel like we are currently, and where is it headed with like AI and with the Apple Vision Pro coming out? Everyone's going crazy about that, and so like what is your thoughts on all that in the future of how we would use technology in engagements outside of what we're doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think practically where social media is today is it's probably 95% video today. And so I think YouTube in many ways is replacing television. And so where you and I probably flipped channels growing up, my kids just know how to search YouTube, and it learns us and it feeds us what we want rather than having to flip channels to find what we want. And so I think you're seeing that TikTok's algorithm is unbelievable, and now it's being copied by these other platforms of short form vertical video. So you see kind of all platforms moving to video, and that becoming more and more significant part of what we're consuming. So when we think about what content we want to create to reach people, I think we've got to be thinking about video. The AI side of it, I think it's, there's so many things that it can help with from, there's tools like Opus Clips that can help create, basically sermon clips for you. I think tools like Canva that can do graphic design for you with AI integrations. There's tools like ChatGPT that can actually design your sermon series logo, or things like that with their DALL-E integration. One of the tools that I've been using a lot with some clients is just ChatGPT. You can teach it. You can basically feed it the transcripts of your sermons and then just say, hey, based on the voice you've now learned from our pastor, can you write an email or draft an email, and then you edit it. And so I think there's just these integrations that it just is going to create a lot of efficiencies for some of the processes we do. And I think the advantage that is to church leaders that lean in is it's creating efficiencies so that people can do what only people can need to do. And so I think it's going to allow for more pastoral ministry rather than behind a computer editing videos or, creating graphics and, websites are going to better optimize themselves. And so there's a lot of tools that are creating some efficiencies. I think there's some darkness to it of like past, you think about all the fake accounts that are created of pastors and some things like that, or deep fake technology that will impersonate maybe, adjust to bad theology sometimes. And so I think there are some challenges with AI, but I'm mostly excited and optimistic of the opportunities that my friend Nick Vujicic actually created a tool that he built for his ministry that they're making available to the mass public called Multitude. And it's actually does voice translation. They call it branded voices, where it learns your voice, translates. So it could actually take, so we're starting with Nick, takes his content, which he speaks with an Australian accent because he was birthed in Australia, but he's from America. So he speaks in English, but it translates and it uses his Australian accent, but speaks Spanish or they do up to 36 languages. So it sounds like Nick, but it's actually putting a voiceover of his voice into any language. So you think about your church being able to be in any language. And when we talk about going to the ends of the earth and the Great Commission, you can see where this technology is going to help us do it, just like social media with, 3 billion active users on Facebook and YouTube. Like that's helping us go to the ends of the earth in a lot of ways, but it's also helping us go into our local communities more effectively as well. So I think there's some really interesting innovations that are happening when it comes to VR. When you think about the Apple Vision Pro and what's happening there, I tested VR probably for the first time 8 years ago. And I remember thinking, this is the future. And I actually own the domain virtualreality.church because I was like, we're going to do church in virtual reality. I've seen churches do that. I think a lot of churches I'm typically seeing churches be late adopters to things. I think more churches have actually been too early of adopters to virtual reality. I think what I've experienced so far has, maybe reached a few, but there's just not mass adoption there yet. But I do think that there's just an inevitable future of they're kind of saying that VR or augmented reality, as well as kind of the last computing platform, the final computing platform is what a lot of people are calling it. I think actually Neuralink is what that actually will be, but or that type of technology that is implanting things into our brains, and that gets really scary and dark. But virtual reality, I think it really immerses us into an environment, and I get really excited about when I think of like virtual reality devotionals, and even Apple has already created a meditation app. I think that's going to be a pretty neat technology. I think 360 video, if you've ever experienced that, it's as if you could be at a concert or a sports venue and be sitting on the front row and experience it as if you're in the room. I think we're going to do church, and some people can experience church that way. I don't think that's going to replace church, just like online church hasn't replaced church. So I think there's some cool opportunities there. I think right now, though, the technology that churches need to pay attention to is AI and how to integrate AI systems into your processes that are going to create efficiencies. I think virtual reality, augmented reality, that type of technology is still probably 5 to 10 years away from mass adoption on how to effectively govern a lot of these innovations. And we need guardrails, around this, just from a societal standpoint. You even take out the faith side of it.
I'm like an extreme, like pure libertarian, because like my guiding principle is like everyone is personally responsible because we're going to all face judgment. And I don't mean in like a scary, condemning way. It's just like God's a light. He's going to show everything that you don't even realize about yourself. And then you're going to either be really humbled or just like double down, be like, no. Right. Yeah. So I think people should be allowed to do anything. Like, even if it's self-harm, it's like if you want to do that with your life, that's great, as long as it's not hurting other people around you. So that's the context I'm going to say this. I no longer trust anything man-made, because like I grew up with technology, like in the 90s and like our generation is like so special. We're like at the precipice and now at the dawning of like AI. It's a movie. Yeah. I'm living a movie. Totally. But understanding that like anything man-made like is like only 99% perfect. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's always this ability to like things fail. Just even like how neutrinos work and like flips a bit and like computer crashes. So that's why I would not trust it personally, but I would be like I would have you on the podcast and talk to you. That's you. Yeah. Because I do think like advances in technology should help people decide what kind of quality of life they want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's all a personal choice. But
for sure.
Me,
for sure.
Yeah. As long as it's outside and it's part of my five senses, I'll use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the other stuff is like, I'm now learning how to not be so dependent on technology.
Yeah.
You know? Like there was a time in my life where if I couldn't find my phone, I'd be like in the worst mood and like my life would be over. But now it's oh, okay, I guess no one could contact me. That's kind of nice. Right? Or I'm like hiking. Yeah. It's like, so yeah, all that to say like, yeah, everybody, you do you, but Danny is staying far away from trusting any man-made stuff.
Thank you for tuning in to the Faithly Stories podcast. We pray this episode gave you the encouragement you needed to continue on your journey. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. The Faithly digital platform offers innovative and practical tools and resources to enhance connection, foster collaboration, and promote growth within the church and ministry space. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help reach more listeners like you. Stay tuned for more uplifting tales from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly podcast. Stay bold, stay faithful, and never underestimate the power of your own story.